Hey everybody, what's going on? Jim Cirilla and Tanya Klein here from Coverage Inc., the leader in screenplay analysis, development, and editing services since 2002. Good day, Tanya.
How are ya?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. What have we got to talk about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about the fact that a lot of writers are watching movies going, I could have done better. I could have written a better movie than that.
Oh
How
my
come
God.
this movie got made? And yes,
I
you've
say
probably,
I say this two or three times a week.
yeah,
Every
exactly.
and
And
not
for
just
all of you
movies, TV
guys
shows.
out there who are saying that, you are probably right. And so we figured, let's go through why and how bad movies get made.
Oh my God, you got 3 hours? This is a huge. Okay, all right.
Okay, so
What
well,
have you got?
basically, big picture, it goes back to what we keep saying, which is there are two sets of rules, one for people who are in the club and one for people who are not in the club. And if you're in the club, in other words, you have the connections,
Yeah,
you have mom or dad or sibling or aunt or whatever championing you. Or
yeah.
also, you've been doing this for a long time and people do not give you notes anymore, or you do not feel the need to actually hone your craft anymore. That's fine because you're in the club. If you're still trying to break in, different story.
So, of course, everybody watching this is just going to be like, well, how do I get in the club? Right? I mean, look, there are ways, right? Once the town gets to know who you are, and that can happen in several different ways. Let's say you've got a Sundance darling film. Again, that's coming up through the indie side, isn't it? But then if you get embraced by Sundance, then the town will welcome you. If you've got the right pedigree, you went to the right university, you had the right, you know, you had the right college roommate, even if you didn't go to the right university, but somebody who has broken into the industry, who can, pave the way for you. If you are in the right secret societies,
But
any of
yeah,
those things.
exactly. So let's get back to, how do these movies even get made? Because what are some of the problems these movies have? For example, one problem that seems to happen a lot is that they're overlong.
Yeah.
Wow, the movie is 3.5 hours, and nobody thought about the fact that Act Two treads water, and there's about 45 minutes we could have lost, and nothing from the story or the characters would have actually been lost. Those 45 minutes were the director wanking off on celluloid. So, yes, so that is the case we mentioned before, which is there are some people where nobody gives them notes and they don't take notes because they don't need to.
Yeah, I mean, this is especially true of directors, but
Yeah.
writer directors in particular seem to be the worst of the batch because you're losing one level of safeguards there. A director should be able to take a writer's work and interpret it and make it better. But if you're both of those things, there's a strong chance that you will lack that ability to see, where you're going off the rails. So, look, how many 2.5 hour movies have we seen just in the past year, Tanya, that deserved that length, that earned that length? I'm going to go with none. None. Literally none. Like every single, and there's so many of them now that are 2.5 hours, 2 hours 45, that could have or should have been 1 hour 45 or even an hour 30 had somebody just come in and just cut the damn thing. But again,
Exactly.
those
Anything
privileged
that's in a
folks.
movie, anything that's in a story needs to earn its place. But the director really likes this shot because, when it goes on for 12 and a half minutes is not enough of a reason. Yes, those are beautiful vistas. Now, what do they tell us about the story and the characters? But yeah, so that's one way bad movies get made. And another one is, well, let's talk about studio and producer input, because in particular, when we're talking about big movie releases, many writers will have worked on this. And the producer might have had ideas, good or bad. The studio might have had input, good or bad. And so you have suddenly you're at writer number 12, and somebody goes, "Oh, but no, I still don't like that. Maybe we should change it to this, or maybe we should get the third draft back in and this." So basically, you often have, this hodgepodge of things where they worked on it until, like, even while the shoot was still going on, was
Right.
already going on, and it's just a mess. And that happens way too often. Disney, for example, is famous for just what they call scrapbooking. It's like there
Exactly.
is no script when they start shooting. There is no locked frigging script. Of course, the end result is, a catastrophe.
Yeah, I feel really bad for the editors on some of those movies
Yeah.
because, they've got millions of hours of digital footage covered from 18 different angles because it's free. Why not? And then they have to somehow take all of that, 8,000 hours of footage and somehow coalesce this into a story that makes sense. And basically it's up to the editor to create the story then because the scriptwriter, nah, not so much. But look, when it comes to interference, we've got producer interference and we've got studio interference. They can both be bad. The producer interference, hopefully that's going to be good unless you get a producer who's got really bad ideas, who just wants their stupid ideas inserted into the movie. We all know everybody's heard about John Peters with his giant spider that he wanted to add into the Superman movie with Nick Cage that eventually, he's like, okay, well, that movie didn't get made. I'm just going to put the giant spider into Wild Wild West. Like, you know, I mean, like, dumb ideas can come from anywhere. They generally come from producers. Sometimes they come from studios, but like, nowadays, what we're getting, Tanya, you saw I'm sorry, the Matt Damon interview where he's talking about Netflix.
Yes, yeah. So I think everyone's been talking about the Joe Rogan interview with Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, where they said, well, working with Netflix, essentially you have to reiterate the plot like three times in
Three times.
dialogue because people will be, on their phones and doing something else while watching a movie.
Yeah.
So, oh
Second
my
screen
God.
viewing. And yeah, so that's what Netflix wants, and they have their formula. It's start with a big action scene. I guess it doesn't matter what the genre of the movie is or whether it's a thoughtful, contemplative piece or not. Type shit, big action scene. And look, I mean, a friend of ours sent us, the Blumhouse formula, right? Like 2 weeks ago, so we got to see that, and it's just it's paint by numbers. It's paint by numbers, and it's terrible. I mean, people say the save the cat formula is limiting. You want to talk limiting? Like, this is crap that is imposed upon the creatives by the studios. How good movies can even get made at all, given
Yeah,
these
it's a
considerations?
miracle. And let me just, say this to the whatever secondary viewing audience where they have to, reiterate the plot. My guess, if what an audience is watching is really good, they might not feel the need to play with their phone.
Yeah. Yeah, seriously, folks, turn off the frickin' phone. Enjoy the experience. And if the experience is not worth enjoying or does compel you to pick up your phone and glance at your phone, then don't continue watching it. Find something that is worthy of your time. There's still people out there making great films and great TV shows that do, engage you on all the levels. That's what you should seek
Yeah.
out.
But so basically, this whole idea that, people are distracted doing other things and rah, rah, rah. So it's led to a certain dumbing down.
Yeah.
And I think that is what people pick up on.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
the next is there is also we touched on that before with Disney, a lack of development and a lack of oversight.
Yeah.
So just as an example, we sometimes work with production companies. And so sometimes we have cases where they send us a script 2 weeks before the start of principal photography. And it's like,
Yeah.
what do you want us to do with that? I mean,
Yeah.
but what? We can rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic? I
if
mean, come
that.
on.
If that. Yeah, no, they just basically want that, independent third party validation so they could say, oh, look, Coverage Inc. gave us a consider, we're good to go. And then when we don't give them that, then it's like, well, it's too late. How do you expect us to change all this? Like, well, maybe you should have come to us with the script, I don't know, 6 months ago, whatever. But look, I think the key thing here is that development is a lost art.
Yeah.
There are still development executives, at the studios and stuff, and there are still a few good ones. But, development as it was, like, let's say back in the day, 70s, 80s, 90s versus now, it's a completely different thing. They used to, if the studio had a project they really liked, or a producer with a deal at the studio had a project they really liked, and they couldn't nail it, they would keep developing it. They'd keep working on it. Nowadays, it's like, nah, look, we got our shoot date coming up. It's good. It's good enough,
It's product. I mean, movies have become product. They've become content. Whereas, just 20 years ago, well, this was an artistic endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, even, as we talked about in our, how to lose your agent or manager video, a lot of managers whose job it theoretically is to develop a script to a really fine level, a lot of those people are now agents. They come from the agent world and hang up their manager shingle, but they still act like agents, which means they don't develop. You might get one read out of them. Maybe they'll give you a few notes. That's it, right? Whereas a manager traditionally is supposed to work with the writer, draft after draft after draft, to get it to the point where it's shiny and beautiful, before sending it out to the town. That happens less and less now.
Exactly. So, and the other part of bad movies getting made is that you have a lot of hype. And sometimes you have hype around a person, a lot of hype, and then everybody throws, all the money in the world at them. And I mean, you wonder where this hype came from, why there is hype, and this person gets to make movies that are then hyped as well. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have, yeah, you don't have the content, you just have the hype. And that also happens a lot because, especially, we live in a world where, hype comes at us from all directions 24/7. From social media, we hear this person is a genius, and then this person is a genius because everyone says he's a genius, therefore you have to believe they're a genius.
There's a lot of that. Look, I mean, there's a lot of great filmmakers out there who, get a lot of hype and they deserve it. And there's a lot of filmmakers who are overhyped and, in my opinion, don't deserve it. And yet they get to make movie after movie after movie because they're in the club, or, they have an independent financier who just keeps putting up their movies and they don't care, putting up the money for the movies. They don't care if
If
they
they
lose
lose it, yeah.
if they lose money for whatever reason. Look, if you're a billionaire, what do you care? So yeah, there's a lot of that. But I also want to mention, going back to your point, Tanya, about the hype. What we're also seeing, I think this is predominantly in the last 5 years, 5, 10 years or so, but we're seeing the studio marketing machines have bought reviewers. They have bots, and they are lying to people to try to create the impression of, momentum, of, positive word of mouth and stuff like that. And the movie could be a piece of crap. But so we've seen this time and again. You mentioned Disney. They're one of the worst
Hmm.
culprits at this. They release stinker after stinker, and they hire reviewers to say, "Oh my God, it's so great," and they get their pull quotes and they put them on the ads, and then they review bomb Rotten Tomatoes, who's all part of the Hollywood industrial complex. And then so they will take down or hide negative reviews, and they will elevate good reviews. Look, it's dishonest, and it's creating a sense of distrust from the viewing public in Hollywood in general, because 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whenever it was, if you read some reviews online from reviewers, you pretty much knew, that they were legit. Whether you agreed with them or not, you didn't stop to think like, yeah, but is this person being paid for this? If somebody raves about something, there was a chance that there was something really good in there to rave about. I don't know if that's true
Exactly.
anymore.
Exactly. So, in other words, next time you think, oh, wow, I could have done a lot better. Yeah, again, you probably could have. And
Probably
the
could have.
nature of the industry, unfortunately, is that often crap gets made.
Yeah, exactly. And but let's sort of end this on a high note. I think, yes, you probably can do better. So the question is, how can you get to the point where your stuff is the stuff that can get made? And, I mean, it's pretty bleak when you think about, well, you're not going to break in, you're not in the right, clique, and you didn't go to the right school, stuff like that. Again, the indie path, right? That is one of the clearest ways that you can get attention and get noticed. You can DIY, you can find a group of like-minded friends to work with you, you can crowdfund, you can find independent film funds. There are ways to make stuff happen, as well as really influential independent film festivals not owned by the Hollywood industrial complex that do find and break new talent. And that is one very clear way in. There are others, but if you can do that, you can eventually be taken seriously by the Hollywood community. And there are people who that happens to, right? Zach Kreger, for example, great example. Still kind of doing it his way, right? And Hollywood was forced to take note, give this guy a deal. That's a beautiful thing.
And if you have any questions, email us at info@coverageinc.com.
And we'll see you guys in the next video.